welcome to the Healthy Living, Happy Life podcast. I am really excited today. I have my first guest, and I believe she will be one of our recurring guests throughout. So I'm very, very excited to introduce you to Amalia Natalio. She's a relationship guide, spiritual teacher, and author, and she will talk about all of that during our conversation today. Amalia is the founder of KarmicKindness. She is a spiritual advisor and intuitive coach who supports her clients in pinpointing and shifting undesirable life patterns, utilizing her divine channel, the wisdom of astrology, human design, soul contract, gene keys, hypnotherapy, and more in her Bespoke Soulful Life program. Very exciting. Bespoke Soulful Life program. Ooh. Hello, Amalia. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, Denise, and thank you for having me on your show. I'm super excited and would be happy to share about my Bespoke Soulful Life program. I was trying to find a word that would sum up the fact that it was customized to you and very much catered to what you need and what's happening in your world. And that was the best word that I could find. And it was also one that, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of the classy days of going to the tailor and getting a bespoke suit and, really feeling like your best self in this custom made outfit. And that's the energy that I would like to bring to the work that I do with my clients. So thank you for noticing the word.
Yes, that is and it's a unique word because it's not one that we use very commonly today. So I think that's important for people to remember, like, this is what this means. It's about the client. You are, and I always think this as a coach, we are kind of a conduit for our clients' success.
Sure, absolutely.
And so it is about what their needs are. And the beauty of all of the trainings that we do and certifications is we have this beautiful toolbox, filled with different tools, if you will, to really support each person individually along their journey. So I'd like to start with your journey. How this is such an incredible it's interesting, it's incredible, it's almost mind-blowing how many pieces you have included in your program. So I'd like to know, how did you even get interested in spiritualness and this concept of your karmic kindness?
Okay, so a few questions in the one question, big questions.
Yes, I tend to do that.
So, thanks, Denise. I'll probably be talking for the rest of the podcast about all these things. You can just sit there. Your job is easy. I will try to keep it somewhat summed up. So basically, Karmic Kindness was born from a period of time in my life when I was just looking for some sort of bigger picture for myself, like how I could make an impact in the world. I was married for 25 years, 4 children, and I'd spent the majority of that time focused on my family and their upbringing. Had the very fortunate ability to stay home with my kids. So worked at home, but also worked within the community and helped my husband at the time with his business. And so I was very busy with those things until I had a significant jaw surgery. And most people think, oh, like going to the dentist and have a little procedure. It was a 9-hour in the hospital for 4 days, could not eat food for 3 months unless it was blended and in a syringe, and about a year before I was able to actually resume the semblance of a normal life. And during that time, I had my mouth wired shut and I wasn't able to speak. And I was kind of forced to be with myself and to not talk, to really listen. And when I would communicate, I would have to do it very mindfully, very thoughtfully. I'd have to really want to communicate something because I would have to write it or sign it or type it or some other form of communication other than this beautiful way of using my voice. So during that time, I realized that's the real key time when I realized I really wanted to do something more. And Karmic Kindness was born from that. There's a lot more to that story, but it was born from that period of time. And it started off as a a jewelry business. So I was creating custom pieces of jewelry for people based on what their needs were. So, kind of bridging the spiritual, the material, and then the energetic worlds, and giving people a place to have support that they needed, to have a visual reminder on their wrist or around their neck, that they could tap into the energy and the support, and a reminder that they had that support. And what I found was that in that process, I was spending a lot of time with people, talking to them, listening to them, sharing strategies, sharing things that I knew that worked for me or from my different experiences in my life. And I realized this price point for a single bracelet and the hours of time I'm spending are not matching up. So the entrepreneur in me decided I needed to change the business model, and a series of events happened where this became what Karmic Kindness is. And the way I see it is we're all coming together. I always say we learn from one another. This is a prime example of that, coming together. And, karma to me, that's a whole nother topic. But the reason I chose Karmic Kindness is because when you think about karma, it's a balance. That's the way I see it. So you're balancing the scales in a way. And what better way to balance the scales than with kindness? And one of the key elements of my jewelry business, and it's still an element today, is a portion of the monies that come into Karmic Kindness go back out to charities and projects that I feel passionate about. Polaris being one of them, which is a very, very supportive structure for human trafficking. And so that's a big one for me. So that's a big place. So it's like this full circle balancing of the scales giving. And that's the reason I came up with that name. That felt very resonant with me. And then because of that journey and that all these pieces of the puzzle that came together, it then morphed into this more of a spiritual coaching strategy, along with bringing in elements of the physical body, bringing in elements of earth medicine, like flower essences and plants that are very supportive. And when it comes to the spiritual, I talk about, a divine channel and an intuition. It's something that I didn't realize was a gift, or I kind of didn't really think about other people not doing it. And even when I was in high school, I had this ability to receive information through my dreams. So, as teenage girls, we would have all kinds of boy problems or things going on. And my friends would come to me and say, "Hey, Amalia, help me with this. What should I do with X, Y, and Z situation?" And I'd be like, "Well, let me get back to you." And I would ask in the dream world, and I would receive an answer, and I would share the answer with them. And I did this for a number of years until I was about maybe 15, 16 years old. And I realized nobody else is doing this. And I felt really weird. I did not want to be the outsider. I wanted to be normal, just like everyone else. So I made a conscious choice to turn that off. And that was definitely, I feel like there's pivot points, choice points in everyone's lives. And that was one for me. And then another one was later in life when I decided to go into this business and then make some marital changes and all of those things that we'll likely talk about over the course of our conversations. Just a really big time that led to where I am now.
It's amazing. Life really is about the journey, and we're all on our own path. And, the path, I used to do a podcast with my friend. We called it the crooked climb, because there's nothing that is just straight, like corporate ladder or, path from here to there. And I always think it's amazing when people can look back and really know where their journey started and kind of all of the twists and turns, because that's how we got to where we are today. And there's obviously so much more that we'll uncover. But I think it's really important to remind people that, everybody's in a different place. We're different souls on this planet. And that's okay. And when you use the word normal, I thought that was funny, because, everybody wants to be normal, but we're all different. So what's normal? And at 15, I couldn't have said I couldn't have made that distinction, but I can at 53, I can make that distinction because, I've gone through life going, oh yeah, what is normal? Because we're all different. So I love it. I love it. I love it. So what was that? So I love the fact that you actually started this with jewelry, because that connects, all of the physical and the earth and the spiritual with the body, and how it connects. And I guess my question is, how did you know that it all connected? Or was it just something that just made sense to you?
I didn't consciously know it all connected. It was a series of different things. So as a child, I was always fascinated with rocks and stones and crystals. I thought they were just so neat. And we would go to museums, and anytime we would go to any science or natural kind of history museum, there's one in DC, and they have this whole big wing of rocks and stones and I would spend the entire time there. I just thought it was just the best. So I already had an affinity for that world, this crystalline world, which is really the foundation of what most of our life experience is built on, energetically speaking. And what happened was, the time that I had surgery, I went to learn more about meditation because I really wanted to support my healing journey. I was familiar with it, but didn't really know how to do it or really much about it. So I found a woman who taught me privately, because I had had surgery and I looked wretched, and it was really not something that I wanted to do in a public situation. But she and I had a couple of sessions before my surgery, and then we had a few after, and I had a couple of really awesome friends who didn't mind looking at me in my ogre-esque kind of form, and she and I talked about this, and she was saying how she took this course in the energy of rocks and stones. And I was like, that's interesting. And then I had also heard somewhere along the line, go back into your childhood. What things lit you up? What were you passionate about? What did you love? And that's when I had put the two pieces together and thought, how could I merge these two to create a business and create an impact in the world? And that's when I did research to find out that each rock, crystal, stone that's on this planet has an energy, a specific energy. It has a message. There's a frequency. It's connected to different planets, to different chakras, to even to different ways of perceiving the world around us. And so that led me on a journey of discovery, of finding the proper stones for people depending on what was going on in their life. And there were typically themes that I saw over and over again. One was anxiety. The other was grief. The other was wanting to feel more energy or more joy. So those were the kind of the basics. Then there were a few one-offs, somebody wanting to get pregnant, another person who was trying to lose weight, different things like that, where obviously they needed outside physical intervention beyond crystals, but that was a really supportive place for them to begin. So literally researching ad nauseum, buying a ton of books, getting books from the library, looking into all sorts of free things online that I could learn and really just soak in the information. And I really, really loved it. And it sparked so much in me, and it was playful and it was fun and it made people happy. So it was such a beautiful marriage of the wisdom, the beauty, and the healing in a little bracelet.
But the interesting piece is the bracelet was almost like the final product of the conversation and the coaching, even though you probably didn't realize at the time that that's kind of what you were doing. So the conversations and the coaching, that culminated to that beautiful piece with whichever stone you chose for the reason, whatever the right reason was. That I think is really where I see how things started to move forward, because you were coaching without even knowing you were coaching. And so and to me, it sounds like a very natural transition.
It definitely was. And I love how you pulled all that together and just, what is the word I'm looking for? Just reflected back to me how the bracelet was a physical representation of the conversation and the energy exchanged. And, one other footnote I want to add to that is because the bracelets were carrying a specific energy. I would clear them. I would put my own blessing into it for each person. I gave them instructions on how to keep it clear, how to utilize it, different ways to charge it. And the other really key element for me in that world was making sure that all of the stones and the elements were ethically sourced. So I don't know if people recognize or know that the majority of quarries and places where jewelry components are created are in countries where they do not have child labor laws and they do not pay a fair wage, and living or working conditions are abhorrent. So I went into another research deep dive on finding suppliers that had ethically sourced their products. And let me tell you, it was not an easy thing to do. And it is definitely not as cheap. So I would go to shows and I would have my bracelets for anywhere from $35 to $60, where somebody else who bought them off of the internet from China could sell, it wasn't exactly the same, but a similar bracelet to what I was selling for $10. And so people would come to me and be like, well, why are yours so expensive? And I would share with them. And some people would really love that. And other people would be like, well, I'm just going to get the $10 one. They didn't really care. It was about the look of it, not the energy of it. Where
they didn't quite get it.
They didn't. And that's okay too. But that was not what was important to me, because what they were wearing needed, to me, in my opinion, needed to be clean and clear. It needed to not have the energy of someone's harm in it. It needed to come from a really beautiful foundation before giving it to someone to support them in a time when they are looking for support.
I completely see how that works. And of course, when you're doing a business, you want to do good for others. And what a great way to make sure you're supporting companies that are, doing, ethically sourcing the stones. I think that's so important, because you're right. I'm really lucky that I get to travel a lot with my husband, and sometimes going to different countries is a great reminder, that we do need to pay attention. Things that happen here in the US, like we have so much more protection. And when we travel, it breaks my heart that those protections aren't there for children, for young women. And that's a whole different conversation, I know. But I think it's so important and from the very beginning, when you started your business, that had to be, that was such a big part of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, the karmic kindness, I mean, it totally goes together. I love it. So let's talk a little bit more about this spiritual relationship. Let's dig deeper into the spiritual relationship in your business when you're working with clients, or if you want to share more about your story. The spiritual relationship to the stones and to the universe and whatever we choose to call our higher power. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts there and how that has moved you forward in your business.
Wow. Well, I will say the spiritual part of my work is very much connected to the spiritual part of me. They're almost one in the same, because especially now that I've transitioned more from the jewelry part into exclusively working with people, either one-on-one, in groups, either workshops, retreats, all the different varieties of ways that I might connect with people. The spiritual aspect is so intricately connected with all of it and everyone that comes into contact with me. So, and I'm not saying that from an arrogant place. It's with anyone, anyone we all have a specific energy, and we may have been talking about this before we started recording, about how we're all very unique individuals. We all have, our own strengths, our own areas of improvement. I don't like to say weakness because I don't feel like any of us are weak. It's just there are certain areas that are a little more developed, maybe some that could use a little more support.
I love
And
that.
and we also each come to each other with the opportunity to learn something about ourselves, to learn something about the other person, and to support each other if we choose to. And I think that's the key part, if we choose to. The
Mhm.
spiritual perspective on all of that is very helpful, in my opinion, because we begin to see each other from the lens of the whole versus the lens of separate Denise and separate Amalia. And when we look at, well, when I look at a client and I look at them through any of the one of the lenses of spiritual science that you mentioned earlier, astrology, human design, gene keys, soul contract, even galactic astrology, we can go back and find your galactic roots, which I always find really fun. There's all these different ways that you can begin to see yourself outside of the conditioning of your upbringing, your culture, your religion, your geography. And you can begin to see the facts that the things inside of you that are looking to come out, that part of you that wants to bust free and feels this excitement and maybe a little anxiety around the anticipation of something new, but yet the excitement is bigger.
Mhm.
Sometimes we need a little bit of a spiritual nudge. So you might need somebody to tell you, hey, you know what? I'm looking at your chart and I can see that you're meant to be on a stage and that you're meant to share your story. Well, meanwhile, there's old fear. I also think of karma as old fear. There's old fear from other lifetimes, if you believe that mode of thinking, that you come in this life with that maybe keeps you from speaking. And I'm literally talking about myself because that's an easy thing to talk about. I came in with this very shy, quiet, reserved type of personality. I did not want people to even notice me. However,
Mm.
I have a Leo son, and Leo is very big and bold, and here I am. And so
Yep.
it's just a very funny experience to have when you're this super shy person who would like to be able to talk and share and also connects with the jaw, which we can talk about in a moment,
Mhm.
but you're scared. And it's
Yeah.
this deep fear that comes from lifetimes of speaking out potentially and being harmed, not being respected, being shut down, a multitude of different reasons. But yet there's this other part of you that's like, no, you're here to be this big, bold person. You're here to make an impact and a difference in this way. And so when I learned these things about myself, it gave me kind of like a permission slip or okay, I can just relax now because I now understand that tension that was happening within me, but where
Mhm.
I didn't understand it before. So I feel like looking at it through the lens of spirituality in that way can be really helpful.
That's so interesting because it's not something that we're taught so often. It's when, it's once we get out of high school and college and we're in a career and kind of in the middle of our life that we start understanding that more. There's more to understand about ourselves, about the world, about the universe. And this is I'm kind of listening and I'm like, wow, because this is something that I'm just really starting to explore myself. Do I understand the things that I've been learning? Not really, but that's the beauty of chatting and meeting other people because we are, we learn from each other. And literally, I'm like, wow, there's you. This is cool. Now I understand you just by your story. There's always been, I've always been someone who, I'm a bit of a leader. I'm not necessarily an A type A personality. Maybe I'm an A minus or B plus. I don't know. But I've always had the desire to be on stage and to be in front of people and to tell, these are my thoughts, but never necessarily me saying it. I might tell someone, oh, I had this really great idea. And, oh, we should talk about this at a meeting and, business meeting. And rather than me say it, I'm like, I encourage the other person to say it. Because then now it becomes their idea. even though it was my idea, my thought. And so part of me was like, well, but I allowed that to happen because I didn't. And now I understand kind of that push and pull um, concept inside of me. Man, I wish I knew this when I was 30. No, 20.
Well, I feel like there's so many younger people that are in the world now that have a much broader perspective and a willingness to see things from a different vantage point, where I feel like, I mean, and listen, I have clients of all ages, you know, from late teens to 70s and everyone in between. So I don't think it's necessarily an age thing. It's a willingness thing. And the thing I notice is, you know, I have, you know, my kids are 21 to 30 years old. I have 4 of them. So there's, you know, 21 to 30 and in between. And talking with them and hearing their perspectives is really interesting because they each, even though they all grew up in the same household with the same parents, they have very different perspectives on things and different levels of interest in seeing outside what they're used to. And so then I just look at their charts and I can see exactly why one child is interested, another child could not care less, another child is like, all right, because you're interested, mom, I'll listen for a few minutes. And then another one who's like, all right, yeah, give me a little more. So it really depends on the child, I think the sex, I think the birth order, but also the spiritual chart of the person. Their soul expression has a huge, huge impact on how they experience their lives.
And I think there's so much, the access is easier now. You know, when we were growing up, yeah, there was books about spirituality and all of the pieces, you know, that you talk about, astrology, human design, all of those things. But you kind of had to go to the library and find it, or, you know, go through the bookstore. And if it wasn't something that you really had any background in, it was like kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. Is this a good book? So now with information, you know, there is so much more information. And this is one of the positive things I think about with social media, is we can learn about new things and explore on our own. And so I think that's really an important piece. But just listening to you about your kids, I can see this very similarly with my niece and my nephew. And probably better than my sister can, because I can see things, you know, from a different perspective because I'm not in the situation. But 2 very different children, right? They're 21 and 26. Same parents, same house, but yes, the way they think, the way they act. I mean, just their mindset about life and the way they perceive things. Very interesting. And the 21-year-old, she's going to listen to this and she's be like, oh, I need to talk to Amalia.
It is really fun. It is really fun to learn more about yourself through the lens of these sciences, because it, like I mentioned before, it almost gives you permission to be fully yourself. You are able to anchor in those parts of yourself that you were like, is that normal? Is that weird? Is that really what I feel, think, believe? I'm not really sure. Or you will say something to a family member, for instance, and then they just shut you down immediately because that's just not how it's done, or that's not what the family has raised you to believe. And I feel like that's such a disservice to these younger people coming into the world. And even those of us in our, you know, middle of our lives with parents who still have their opinions and judgments that they attempt to place on us, oftentimes falling flat, but still it's there. You know, I think it's really important for all of us to really be able to understand ourselves, but also run through our own meter of truth the people that we're listening to, because not everyone is going to be giving you information that is truthful or that is based on their it could be based on something they heard versus their own experience. And there's so much out there, it's hard to wade through it. So I would just recommend for people, if they do decide to go into a little more exploration, kind of check in with yourself and see, does this path or this person feel good before embarking on this journey? Because there's a lot of people that may go outside of their integrity and say, oh, we need this from you or that from you. And just be aware, not fearful, just aware.
I think that's important, because I know I had a situation at one point where I was talking to someone, and the conversation was going in one direction, and all of a sudden it was kind of like a, needle across the record. And she's like, okay, well, but now you have to buy this, and that in order for us to work together. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm not sure what you do yet completely. And,
Right.
So it was more about the sale of whatever it was, rather than the education and the learning of what I actually needed. So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah.
We have a few more minutes in this segment. So I just wanted to ask, where would you recommend someone to start? So we've talked about this a little bit, but how does somebody start? Like, okay, Amalia, this is really cool. I'm interested in learning more about astrology. How does one do that? Like, I'd love
Well,
to learn more about, my sign, and not just
so
like what I can see in the newspaper on Sundays.
so I would say, listen, if you're curious, searching online and just getting absorbed in whatever content, whatever it is, I'd like to learn more about my Leo sun sign and see what comes up and just see what sparks your interest. If you're looking to understand something in your life, let's just say you're in going through a transition, or there's a challenge that's showing up for you, whether it's relationships are my jam, but it's not just intimate partnership relationships, it's relationship with yourself, with other people. And that could be an intimate partner, a family member, your child, a parent. It could also be the relationship with your body, the relationship with the universe, the relationship with money. So all different ways. And the way I see it is that there's all these beautiful places to pull information from. Why be limited to just one? So whenever I do a session with someone, I'm pulling charts from all of the spiritual sciences that I am familiar with, and pulling from each one whatever they need based on what's going on in their life. So that's how I operate. So if somebody's looking specifically to learn about astrology, or they want just a regular old astrology or human design reading, I'm probably not your person, because I'm looking at all of these things in order to give you the most valuable information possible. And there might be one modality that I focus on more than the other, or maybe two. Just because we're looking at all of them doesn't mean I'm going to be sharing all of them. And then in that process, I also feel like learning through experience and learning from your own engagement with astrology or with the gene keys is the best way to learn it. I mean, I can sit here and fire hose someone with every detail about their charts, but what are they taking away from that? Maybe one or two tiny pieces that they may or may not integrate into their life. And so that was not really as valuable a resource as it could have been. So I just approach it differently in terms of, I want you to walk away with a better understanding of yourself, with action steps that you can take in order to help you move through whatever is going on and support you along the way, which is pretty much my Soulful Life program. And
I was going to say, we go back to Bespoke, the Soulful Life program.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. We've gone full circle there. And next time we are going to talk more about relationships and the spiritual relationships, which you just mentioned, all of those different types of relationships. So that's going to be a great next session. So for those of you who are listening, stay tuned. Amalia, before we go, please let everyone know how they can find you.
I would be happy to. So you could find me at Karmic, KARMIC, kindness, KINDNESS.com. And just for your listeners, Denise, I am going to offer a taster session, which is basically a 30 to 45 minute session where they get a little taste of what I do. And they can they'll fill out a form, and it gives me all the information. I can run the charts and what they're specifically looking to better understand or work through. And it gives them a better understanding about what is happening in their life, but also what I do. And then they can determine if that's something they want to go forward with. Because I don't do singular readings typically, and I don't do one-off sessions. It's the program, but this is a special thing that I'm doing for a limited time for your listeners. So if you're interested, you can go to KarmicKindness.com and you'll see the information. And I think maybe you'll have a link in the description too, Denise.
There will, absolutely. All this information will be in the show notes. So if you didn't catch it, everyone, check out the show notes and get all of the information, how to get in touch with Amalia and how to get that tester session. I know I'm on board.
Yeah.
Well, Amalia, thank you for this section. I am so excited. This was great information. I'm really looking forward to our next conversation. And to listeners, thank you for being here. And if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, please make sure that you give us a 5-star review in that Instagram or on, well, not Instagram, on podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and ask questions. Let me know what you want to hear about, and we will make sure that we get the right guest, or sometimes it's me, but often the right guest to answer your questions. So thank you again, everyone. Before I head out, my last thought to you, as always, healthy living, happy life. I'll see you next time.